Something people often forget about Team Fortress 2 is that it's 17 years old, a fact that some people are a little too excited about.
For a game that's like almost 18 years old. Almost legal, by the way.
Point is, we have it real good nowadays. While we enjoy TF2's near endless customization, its rich variety of maps, and flawed, albeit very convenient pool of official servers to play on, the same could not be said for TF2's first few years of existence. TF2 launched with 6 maps and a grand total of 0 official servers to play on, so pretty much off the bat it was up to the newly forming TF2 community to create and curate their own TF2 experience. And it really wasn't long until the player base started craving something more. The average TF2 player quickly got bored of Valve's pitiful offering of only 6 maps, a sentiment that was echoed by gaming journalists at the time and often cited as the game's biggest criticism, a criticism that TF2's most dedicated fans began addressing weeks prior. During TF2's beta testing period, a player called Zeta would figure out how to use Valve's publicly available mapping tools to successfully create the first ever custom TF2 map. This landmark map was called CP Lazy Town, which even past its legendary reputation back then, still has plenty of servers running it to this day. After TF2 came out and the initial hype of the 6 release maps died down, many aspiring mappers hunkered down to create their own spins on TF2's at the time incredibly limited roster of game modes. A whole slew of maps would circulate around TF2's initial servers, and the better a map was, the longer it would stay in everyone's collective consciousness. And for the best maps, the absolute 1 percentile such as Turbine and Junction, Valve would add them to TF2's vanilla files. But at the same time, there are some maps that were so beloved that they persist even without Valve's acknowledgement, such as CP Orange, Mario Kart, and of course the aforementioned Lazy Town. But what about the rest of that 99%? What about all the maps that were liked by TF2's revolving door of players, but ultimately slipped through the cracks and became forgotten? Well, most of these maps are either hidden on obscure corners of the web, or completely lost media. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Well, after my last video, which was a documentary on one of 2007's most influential TF2 subcommunities, aka Control Point, I've had the pleasure of getting in touch with a lot of TF2 veterans from that time period, some of which have straight up given me their map folders that date from 2007 to around 2009. So in my possession now is honestly a very large number of TF2 maps that were popular back in the day, some of which can't even be found online anymore. So I've picked 8 maps from this collection, and in no particular order we'll be taking a closer look at them as well as seeing how they hold up on a full server of people in the TF2 of today. So yeah, let's get into it. Our first map is Haywood, a payload map by Laz. Set in that familiar Badlands environment we all know and love, Haywood is a multi-stage payload map. With the first ever payload map, Gold Rush, being released only a couple months earlier, the inspiration is really easy to see. Laz began work on Haywood sometime in the summer of 2008, as on July 5th of the same year, they would begin a thread on tf2maps.net about their ambitious map. How early Haywood might have looked is lost to us now, as early screenshots of it were hosted on Laz's personal site, 42cropcircles.com, which is now defunct and unarchived. The map was pretty well received on the forum, with people excitedly giving their own 2 cents on what should be changed. Laz quickly became respected on the thread, as he was quick to take criticism and make changes. Unfortunately for Haywood, however, tragedy struck. The map began to have a game-breakingly consistent bug. Every time blue took the first point, the red team got stuck in their left spawn. This got so bad that it started turning people away from the map, making play sessions of it happen less and less frequently. Laz remained undiscouraged, promising that this bug will be ironed out soon. That is, until another tragedy struck. After a refreshing vacation to Normandy, Laz unfortunately discovered that they had lost the USB stick where they kept the latest build of Haywood on. At this point, they begin citing a lack of motivation to finish the map. Despite all the attempts to fix it, the aforementioned spawn door bug was still there, causing Laz to pull all downloads of the latest version until they fixed it. This didn't end up happening, as after one more progress report on January 14th, 2009, the map, and subsequently its creator, would simply vanish. No downloads of Haywood existed on the internet, as all of its download links were either pulled or expired. That is, until very recently. The TF2 map archive uploaded the final version of Haywood, aka Beta 6, to their site, and for a double surprise, found within the Geek Critique's ancient TF2 downloads folder was Haywood Beta 5. These two versions have very little difference between each other, so when we tested them, we pretty much used the two versions interchangeably. So, is Haywood fun? As previously mentioned, Haywood is very clearly inspired by Gold Rush. And while some of you might be groaning at the thought, Haywood is much more open and vertical than its inspiration. The map has plenty of flank routes and ample cover for both teams. Until the final point of the first area, that is. I am very conflicted on the final point in the first stage of Haywood. On one hand, I really like it conceptually. I like this little sniper cubby, I like the bridge that's over the big pond, I like all these little spots for sentries that provide good defense, but also don't feel like impossible to push past. However, Haywood has one massive flaw. So when this map was in development, some people feared that Pyro's upcoming compression blast ability might make this bridge area unplayable. As you might have guessed, this is not the massive flaw I was talking about earlier. It's this massive sightline for the red team. While blue snipers have that cozy little room I mentioned before, it is completely outperformed by red snipers' platform.
Playing sniper is awesome.
Yeah, I heard a store's burning out, but that's ridiculous.
Oh my god! Yeah, nice video, bitch!
I mean, this is ridiculous. Ample cover, a perfect view of the car, it just has it all. Going back to the first point, there's a bit of a sniper hell there as well. But despite that, we never found it getting shut down as much while playing. Haywood's second stage looks incredibly fun, very reminiscent of Frontier, whose eventual creator was actually a big fan of Haywood. This second area has winding paths, flank routes, verticality, and generally enough interesting elements to be the highlight of Haywood. I'm saying looks like and not is, because after its 16-year slumber, the spawn door bug reared its ugly head in all of our play sessions, frustrating most of our players and, unfortunately, leaving this promising second area unplayed and unloved. It's a shame, really. During Haywood's creation, hundreds of players played the map over and over hundreds of times. TF2's grassroots mapping community looked to Haywood with hope, seeing its massive potential. But a couple mishaps, an unfortunate map-breaking bug, and the loss of motivation that came afterward ultimately cast it into complete obscurity. It's tragic. If this map was finished and fully functional, it could have been one of the greats. But for now, it ranks 3.5 out of 5 in flavor and a 3 out of 5 in tomfoolery, with a final, respectable score of 6.5 out of 10. Moving on, welcome to Toy Fort Beta 2, a 5CP rap map where you play as tiny little mercenaries within 2 child bedrooms separated by a small hallway. Toy Fort was created by Shonif, who was a respected pixel artist within the FPS Banana community, with credits given to Zeus and Ares as co-authors. The map was released on November 26, 2007, slightly tweaked a day later on the 27th, and completely untouched since. The map went somewhat viral online, as this was within the very early days of TF2, and a fully fledged map like this was still pretty rare. While many people were quick to praise the map and give their own 2 cents on how it should be improved, their critiques fell on deaf ears, however, as the original map creators would never come back to Toy Fort, just leaving it as is. While Toy Fort never reached the same levels of obscurity as Haywood, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone playing it today. But why? We decided to try it for ourselves and see. Visually, Toy Fort is pretty muted and simplistic. Neat ideas like the toy truck and the blocks spelling out red and blue are great, but such detailing is missing from the other areas of the map. Overall, it achieves the childhood room aesthetic nicely, where the cartoony TF2 mercs can now be reinterpreted as cute little toy soldiers, which is something I really enjoy personally. Toy Fort is surprisingly fun to play as well. The middle point can get really hectic, and while the flank routes might be a little too bare bones and cramped, especially this zigzag one, A big disappointment was the staircase, which I thought would be a neat hazard or perhaps open more areas in the map, but unfortunately it's just an invisible wall. The last notable thing about Toy Fort I'll mention is its final point. It looks pretty good, right? Well, sorry to disappoint you, but this is not the final point. This is. And yes, that, in fact, is the defending team's spawn door. While it may seem like a completely hectic, impossible to push choke, and yeah, it is. A surprising quirk of it is that you can shoot through the little gaps in the walls, which is technically an advantage. As hellish as it looks, this point is genuinely pretty fun to push into and defend. As someone who generally dislikes 5CP maps, Toy Fort was a genuine surprise in how fun it was. Its simple and fun layout lets each class shine, especially heavy. So to all my heavy bros out there, this is the promised land. Toy Fort gets a 4 out of 5 in flavor and a 3.5 out of 5 in tomfoolery, resulting in an overall of 7.5 out of 10. Cool! Now here's a map you actually can't find a single download of online. Welcome to CTF Shooting Gallery B3 by Piano Dan. The gimmick behind the map is pretty unique. Red team occupies the multi-level panopticon in the middle, where they must snipe the blue team as they try to make their way across this horseshoe-shaped track, wherein they must take the intel and bring it all the way back to their spawn. The map has two special rules. Trying to enter Red's base as blue kills you, and engineers can't place down any buildings. Work on Shooting Gallery started sometime before June 8, 2009. The map saw frequent progress reports from Dan via a thread on TF2maps.net. While any and all downloads of the map are gone, I've managed to get a copy through the Geek Critiques TF2 folder. The map went up to version Beta 8, however, the only version we have now is Beta 3. So, is this idea fun in practice? Well, Shooting Gallery is fun. The map surprisingly has a lot of depth for blue to take advantage of. There's 3 paths. The top path has the most cover from sniper fire. However, it's by far the longest one to take. Conversely, the 2 other paths are much shorter, but also feature less cover as well as additional hazards like pits and saws. While the obvious class choice might be Scout, with his speed and small size, he isn't necessarily the only good choice. While you can't pick up the intel with the rocket jumper or sticky jumper, you can easily run more mobility-based soldier and demo loadouts to make quick trips to the intel and back. A more underrated pick is, surprisingly, heavy. While you may be pretty slow, your health does allow you to survive body shots and quickscopes, which could be the difference between life or death. That's not to say you can't play a more defensive role either. You can counter-snipe and use flare guns to hinder red snipers. This created a funny situation where some Zoid figured out that you can use the Scorch Shot to completely throw off the whole red team's aim, and we all thought it was completely over for the red team, until someone just figured out to equip the Danger Shield and things just continued as normal. Visually, the map has this sort of sunset-y look that I really like, and this is a vague personal thing, but the way the props and cover are spread about gives me a cozy prop hunt or Gmod-like feeling, and I really like that. Apparently later versions adopted a snow aesthetic, and I really would have liked to see that. This map is already really fun, and besides the visuals maybe needing a little bit of an update, this map is pretty much perfect as it is. This gets a 4 on flavor and a 5 in tomfoolery, aka a near perfect 9 out of 10. Now when I say the name CP_SMB Castle 2, what kind of map are you envisioning? If you guessed that SMB stood for Super Mario Bros. And imagined a classic Mario-style castle, you would be absolutely wrong. Because it's actually in reference to the Saturday morning breakfast cereal webcomic, a daily digital comic strip that has been running since 2002, aka before you were born. The comic was created by Zach Wiener, who still posts new strips over 20 years later. Zach has a brother, Marty Wiener. Zach and Marty were huge fans of Team Fortress Classic when they were younger, so when TF2 came out, they'd play it pretty much all the time. This compelled Marty to create a map for TF2 that was very loosely based off his brother's comics. So welcome to SMB Castle 2, which is actually supposed to be a film set according to Marty, and that look is pretty clear when you look at Blue's side. This is a 3-point capture map that tries to tell a bit of a story. Blue has to take over Red's castle. At first, the castle only has 2 entrances, entryways. You could enter through the broken wall on the left side, or you could take the incredibly fun catapult, which conveniently sends you flying far enough to reach the first point, it being a giant tower, which when capped sends out an alert that it's about to blow and... Yeah, that was a little underwhelming. Point 2 is a smaller nook that opens the giant castle door when capped. This finally leaves us with point 3, which looks like it could be a cool final castle showdown, but in reality it's just a really hard area to push into, resulting in a map that has some really cool set pieces at the start and then an impossible to push end. But are the first 2 points fun? Yeah, I'd say they are. Visually, I think SMB Castle is such a fun concept. I'd like to see modern mappers take the idea of a 60s film set and run wild with it, though I will say that the SMBC comics featured in the map are just kinda... I think if this map had more work done on it, it could have been great. Unfortunately for us, Marty decided to have an actual career instead. He went on to be a chief technical officer at Reddit and also the main engineer behind Pinterest. He now works for some startup. Who gives a fuck? This map gets a 4 out of 5 in flavor and a 2 in tomfoolery, giving us a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, now I know finding out that SMB Castle had nothing to do with Mario might have disappointed a lot of you. So I'm gonna make it up to you because next up we on PL Donkey Kong! Based on the only arcade classic that can rival the babe-tastic appeal of Miss Pac-Man, PL Donkey Kong Final is a surprisingly faithful recreation. Created by Mick, What the Funk, and Mammal, and posted on Game Banana on December 30th, 2008, the map would go on to have a semi-popular run for a couple years before disappearing from TF2's servers entirely. As you might have guessed, this map plays out exactly like the Donkey Kong arcade game, except Blue has to push Mario to the finish line while Red tries to stop them. This map is the definition of awesome, alright? You can interact with the ladders and barrels, pose in front of the greatest Kong the world has ever known, and even look at Miss Pac-Man. It's a perfect recreation of the original game. The best part being that when you're spectating, you can view the match in that familiar side-scroller angle, which is such an awesome touch. And all of this to say that PL Donkey Kong is really fun too. While you might think that making a side-scroller into a 3D map might make it cramped, it really isn't. There's enough space here for both teams to easily maneuver the map. In our experience, each match was balanced and fun. My only 2 critiques of this map are, firstly, while you can push around the barrels, they don't actually, deal any damage after a collision. That was a massive bummer. And secondly, sometimes it feels like you have to be obnoxiously close to Mario for him to move his fat ass. Other than that, I genuinely think we have a 10 out of 10 here, 5 in both flavor and tomfoolery. Highly recommended. Here's one that might get some of you feeling nostalgic. This is CTF Hall of Death, and the name really just gives it away. This map was made by Nip, a mapper that's infamous in the Counter-Strike 1.6 community due to his ridiculous, often abstract maps. That's not to say that they didn't dip their feet into TF2 mapping as well. This particular TF2 map was uploaded onto the internet November 13th, 2007, and has been completely untouched since. It was genuinely pretty popular and well-liked in the months after its release. However, simply calling it Hall of Death is an understatement. It's a hallway with a flag on each side. After a short setup time, the doors splitting the hallway in half slide down and all carnage breaks loose. This map is pure carnage, but in a really fun way. The best way I can describe it is by comparing it to another semi-popular map, DM Duel. I have spent many a childhood days and nights playing on DM Duel, partly because it was just so simple. You go in, get a kill, die, respawn, and repeat. It's the perfect kind of brainless map that I still find myself going back to, even today. Hall of Death strikes that same sort of chord in my heart. Its gameplay loop is nearly indistinguishable from Duel, with one added layer of complexity, the flag. If the timer runs out and nobody scores, the game results in a stalemate. This, in turn, genuinely encourages some teamwork, sneaky strategies, and rare clutch AF moments where someone actually manages to score a point. It felt super nostalgic to play personally, even though I've never seen the map before. I don't have that much more to say on CTF Hall of Death. I think it fell out of favor when stuff like duels started to take off, because on HOD, you can actually set up and maintain sentry nests, something that isn't really possible on duel. And I think the type of people who looked for these quote-unquote brain-dead experiences probably disliked the sentry nests, the timer, and most of all, having any sort of objective whatsoever. This map is kind of a perfect bridge between 24/7 2-4 and DM Duel, which makes it awesome for someone like me who enjoys both, but I can see why most people just decided to play on one or the other, leaving CTF HOD in obscurity. This is going to be controversial, but I'm giving this one a 3.5 in flavor and a 3.5 in tomfoolery, giving it a very generous 7 out of 10. Full disclosure, immediate spoiler, in my heart of hearts, this is a 10 out of 10 map. Welcome to Falling_CP, which has a nearly identical story to the previous map, being made by the same creator, but uploaded just 3 days earlier on November 10th, 2007. So what is Falling? How does it play? Just watch.
Ethos. Should I use the base jumper? Oh no. Help! Help! Help!
With two massive teleporters on each side, Falling allows you to, well, fall over and over and over again until you land on the central platform at the bottom. That is, unless you land on a solid surface wherein you'll die instantly. But don't worry, if you land in that inch of water, you'll be perfectly unharmed. There's slopes which you can use to control your fall, slow your descent, and if you're particularly good at strafing, nab health packs as well. It doesn't look like it, but this map is peak. I've been playing TF2 for over a decade, and I'm putting my foot down that this is one of the most consistently fun maps, just period. By the way, you might think that this is King of the Hill, but Falling came out years before Koth even existed. No. The way it works is that both teams can cap the point. The cap takes an obnoxious amount of time, and as soon as the point is capped, the team that captured wins instantly. However, you might have noticed the timer at the top of the screen. If time runs out, just like HOD, it's a stalemate. This is a map void of any and all criticism. It is just complete, unfiltered awesomeness. Again, 10 in flavor, 10 in tomfoolery, just a 20 out of 10 map. And finally, we have the last map we'll be looking at today, and it's a bit of a personal one. This is CTF_Snowfort, a map created by a person who went by the name Godzillar, made sometime before December of 2007. I say sometime before because the official origin point of this map is lost, presumably posted on the now defunct and barely archived Secret Agent Clan website. Snowfort features 2 cozy cabins with secret bases behind them which hide the flag, and also have these wide-ass doors which are pretty funny. The 2 bases are separated by this half-mountain, half-valley type middle area. With multiple ways of stealing the enemy's flag, Snowfort is a surprisingly fun and well-aged CTF map. But that's not why it's so personal to me. Snowfort was a fan-favorite map in the old Control Point community. It was constantly mentioned and even had an entire episode about it. I don't need to go into why the Control Point community was special. I did a whole hour-long video about it, but Snowfort was that community's, like, hangout spot. And I just couldn't find a download of it anywhere at the time. But now, thanks to some former members of Control Point, I was finally able to play Snowfort in its full glory. And it was great. The map itself is just plain dumb fun. You know the appeal of Capture the Flag, I don't have to explain that here. Maybe it was the lack of any sort of time limit, but eventually our server devolved into fun banter and possibly the most I've ever laughed while playing this game. I do want to give an honorary mention to the Christmas-themed companion cube props on this map, which can be freely smacked around, creating absolute peak entertainment. The flavor in Snow Fort is a 5 out of 5 type plentiful, with glowing Christmas trees, cozy cabins, little snowball fight barricades, and obnoxiously wide doors. There's a little vent you can go through to drop down into the intel room like you're in a spy movie, just mwah. It might be a 17-year-old barely remembered map from an equally old game, but Snow Fort has that sort of late-night charm, like the Dust Bowls before it and the Turbines and Hightowers that came after. In my heart, it's a 10 out of 10 map, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I guess I'm trying to get at something deeper here, because I think the way most of us play TF2 makes sure that we never stumble across these kinds of experiences, much less archive them. Look, this isn't a gaming isn't fun anymore or TF2 fell off type of thing. I think casual mode is good, despite its many flaws. I think hopping into a quick vanilla match, getting some frags, playing the objective, and then piecing out is a fine way to enjoy this game. But after my 1000th game of Upward, there was this feeling of discontent that came up in my mind. I thought maybe I was just bored of TF2, maybe I finally had my fill. But then I remembered that this wasn't how I fell in love with this game. Back in 2013, you wouldn't see me on Badwater or whatever. You'd see me on DM Duels, CP Orange, Trade Plaza, Surf Utopia, and other tens, maybe even hundreds of unique community maps that I can't even name anymore. I'm not saying TF2's vanilla maps aren't fun, God no. But going from stock Koth or Payload or 5CP to something like Falling or Shooting Gallery is honestly a massive breath of fresh air. To see the game shaken up and flipped on its head so well that it feels like a complete game changer, while still being the Team Fortress 2 I love. I also want to push against this silent notion that maps like these are inherently inferior to maps that try to be as vanilla as possible. You'll see YouTubers on here endlessly harping about how infinitely complex TF2 is, but they only really view it through the lens of casual or whatever. People feel like playing on maps that are completely and strictly TF2-y detracts from that complexity, when it couldn't be further from the truth. I'll bring up two examples. On Falling, after the initial few falls, people started to figure out their own strats on how to succeed using TF2's side grades. None of which, by the way, even existed when this map came out. Some figured that using the man treads, you can fall a bunch of times to store enough force to instantly kill anyone you land on. Someone else figured out that the inch of water that's supposed to break your fall actually marks you as wet, allowing Pyro with the Neon Annihilator equipped to do some massive melee damage. Some equip the parachute to give themselves an aerial advantage while clearing out the platform. And also, someone in our Discord hit like the sickest huntsman shot ever. Look at this.
That was insane.
CTF Shooting Gallery was a surprising one too. I've already talked at length how this map went from just being a scout and sniper map to having nearly all the classes have special, equally good, unique ways of tackling the objective. These two maps don't fit the TF2 art style or adhere to the core design principle, whatever the fuck that means. But they have that fun factor, that easy to learn, hard to master nature that makes this game so infinitely appealing and enduring. That's why I think we shouldn't be so quick to write them off, especially nowadays as community servers continually drop like flies as time goes on. And so I've decided to do something about it. All of the footage you've seen in this video has been recorded on my friends and I's TF2 server, Swishcast Central. We've started a really chill Discord community where nearly every weekend night we get together and play some good old TF2. And more often than not, we do it on maps like the ones I've shown here. It's all run out of pocket and has been some of the most fun I've ever had playing TF2. And if that sounds like something you want to be a part of, you can join the Swishcast Discord with the link in the description. And if you just want to play a good old round on the maps I've talked about today, we'll be running them on the server for a good while after this video's out, as well as some other obscure maps that didn't make the cut here. This is like off script, but I want to mention one other thing. A lot of people don't know how community servers work. Uncletopia is like the exception, right? It's not gonna be like a full 24/7. Like you do need to like wait for play sessions to happen. So if you join the Discord and then you see me ping like, hey guys, playing this weekend and this and this time, you will be in a fun server. But if you just join a 0-player server expecting it to fill up like instantly. That's just not gonna happen. But you know, prove me wrong. And that's about it. I think I've yapped enough for one video. I hope to see you on the server, and maybe since you've watched the whole video, you could consider throwing me a subscribe, you know, to see more stuff like this. My name's Indy, and I hope you stick around.